How do you determine whether a trainer and assessor is capable? Now, most RTOs can tell you which training and assessment credential somebody holds, and they can usually produce a matrix showing the qualifications that the person delivers, their industry experience, and their professional development, and some evidence that's used to establish currency. Now, that information is important, but it doesn't really tell you whether the person can explain a difficult concept clearly or design a meaningful learning activity or recognize when learners are becoming confused, whether they can make a sound assessment judgment or respond appropriately when a learner needs support. A trainer and assessor matrix can tell you whether somebody appears to meet a set of requirements on paper, but it can't tell you what that person actually does in practice. Now, this video is part 1 of my 3-part series Beyond the Trainer Matrix, created for RTO leaders who want a more meaningful way to understand, observe, and develop trainer and assessor capability. Now, across the series, we're going to look at how to define capable practice, gather meaningful evidence of what trainers are doing, and turn that evidence into targeted professional development. By the end of the series, you'll have a clearer approach to capability conversations, trainer observation, and professional development planning, even if you don't come from a training and assessment background yourself. Now, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so that you know when the next part of the series is available. And before we get into this first video, I do want to be transparent throughout the series. I will be referring to some of my own tools and resources, including the Clued-In Capability Framework and the Trainer Observation and Development Tool. Now, I developed these products to help RTOs put the ideas that we'll be discussing into practice, but you absolutely don't need to purchase them to follow the series or to apply what you learn. I'll explain the principles, processes, and questions that you can use within your own RTO, whether you choose to use my tools or develop your own or adapt something you already have, okay? So no obligation. Now, if you do decide that you'd like a ready-made structure to support the process, then I will show you in parts of the videos where my resources can help. But either way, my aim is to help you to move beyond just maintaining a trainer matrix and help you to build a more meaningful approach to trainer and assessor capability. Now, when I was working as a senior leader in an RTO, I became incredibly frustrated with our performance review system. And I know this performance review system was quite similar to what a lot of other RTOs used. The issue was that the statements were really broad and generic and subjective, really. They didn't reflect the realities of what trainers and assessors actually did. And they certainly didn't give managers enough information to evaluate the quality of their practice. To give you some examples, a trainer might be assessed against a statement such as communicates effectively or works well with others, or this one's one of my personal favorites, performs their role to the required standard. What's the required standard, right? Those statements could apply to almost anybody working in any organization, right? In any industry. What did communicates effectively mean for a trainer? Did it mean that they replied to emails? Did it mean that they explained technical concepts in a way that their learners could actually follow? Did it mean that they asked useful questions and listened to their learners and adjusted their communication? How could a manager confidently rate somebody against a statement that's never really been defined properly? The system also made meaningful feedback difficult. Most staff genuinely wanted to know what they were doing well and what they needed to develop, but the performance review process didn't give us a useful language for that conversation. And it created difficulties in other situations too. Occasionally a staff member believed that they should receive a pay rise or progress into a more senior position, but their practice hadn't developed in a way that actually supported that progression. But it's very difficult to, have a conversation when the organization's never really explained what progression looks like. If expectations are vague, feedback can feel personal, right? And the manager might actually struggle to explain why length of service or confidence in the role doesn't automatically demonstrate higher level capability. I know that was something I certainly found difficult. Now, it wasn't fair to the trainer, and it didn't give managers the structure that they needed to make confident and consistent decisions. So, amongst all of this, I eventually came across the VET Practitioner Capability Framework, and it gave me a much more useful starting point. And, I had something that attempted to describe the work of a VET practitioner in terms that actually reflected the profession. It helped move the conversation beyond generic behaviors and towards the actual capabilities involved in training, assessment, and professional practice. And I decided to combine that framework with a technique that I'd used many years earlier as a primary teacher. And this is a technique called assertive mentoring. So without getting into lots of detail, the original assertive mentoring approach that I used as a primary teacher used a traffic light rating system. Statements describing outcomes, in that case, learning outcomes, skills, could be highlighted green, orange, or red, depending on the child's current capability. And this was something that was used as both a self-assessment process for the child and also as an assessment process for me as the teacher. And that very visual approach made development much easier to understand. Instead of just receiving a vague bit of feedback or a grade, the children could actually see which statements they were consistently achieving and which ones were their next targets. What was the next stage of their learning, their growth? And so because this worked so well with 10-year-olds, I actually adapted this process for the trainers and assessors in my team using the VET Practitioner Capability Framework. The idea is that we used a traffic light based system where the trainer and assessor completed their review of this. I completed one independently, and then we met to compare what they'd identified, what I'd identified, and then we would have a discussion based around that. And the process completely changed the quality of our conversations. Staff could see where they were. They could understand what stronger practice looked like, and they could also take greater ownership of their development. Managers had clearer language to support feedback and were less reliant on personal impressions. After a couple of rounds of doing this myself, we appointed a number of training team leaders. And so I also trained them to use the approach with their staff that sat, that answered to them, that were reporting to them. And this was really important because it empowered those middle managers, those team leaders as well. It was also very helpful in terms of communicating with the senior leadership team who didn't have an extensive training and assessment background, because it meant that things were explained much more clearly in terms of performance, and it wasn't putting a non-training and assessment background lens on performance. It was much more prescriptive in terms of the role of a trainer and assessor and what they're expected to do. So the Clued-In Capability Framework grew from that experience, although the approach has continued to evolve, and it is much more detailed and more aligned with the 2025 standards. That was my aim for the Clued-In Capability Framework. Now, the current framework uses green to identify capabilities that the person consistently demonstrates with observable evidence. Yellow or orange, depending on what color highlighter you have, identifies a capability that's demonstrated sometimes, partially, or with support, and has therefore become an area for growth. Now, I deliberately removed red because the purpose isn't to create a visual catalogue of everything somebody can't do. It's to identify confirmed strengths and make the next stage of development visible. So, for example, a trainer might be performing confidently at one developmental level without demonstrating statements at the next. And that doesn't mean that they're failing. It means that those higher level statements might represent a future pathway if they're relevant to that person's role and aspirations. Not every trainer needs to become a strategic leader. Some people want to remain highly capable trainers and assessors without moving into management, mentoring, or organizational leadership, and that's perfectly okay. Capability development should reflect the person's role, context, experience, and professional goals. It shouldn't become a race to colour in every statement. It's not a colouring in activity. So this is where RTO leaders need to separate three related ideas: whether somebody is credentialed, whether they're current, and whether they're capable. So a credential tells us that the person has met the requirements for a qualification or other accepted credential, right? Now, it's an important entry requirement, but it's not a permanent guarantee of high quality practice. Currency tells us whether the person's training and assessment skills and industry knowledge remain relevant and up to date. But, a list of completed webinars or conferences or industry activities doesn't automatically tell us whether the person's actually applied what they learned, right? Capability is demonstrated through practice. It's the person's ability to draw on their knowledge, skills, experience, and professional judgment to perform their role effectively in context. Now, under Standard 3.2, RTOs need to make sure that training and assessment are delivered by appropriately credentialed people with current skills and knowledge in training and assessment. RTOs also need to demonstrate how trainers and assessors undertake continuing professional development, and that includes development relating to engaging and supporting students. Now, that requirement can't be met meaningfully by collecting certificates and hoping that attendance has changed practice. A trainer might attend 10 PD sessions and make absolutely no change to their delivery. Another trainer might participate in one targeted mentoring activity and then apply a new strategy, gather feedback on it, and substantially improve learner engagement. But if we only count completed activities, the first trainer appears to have developed more, right? But if we examine capability and impact, the second trainer has produced the stronger outcome. Now, trainer and assessor capability is also much broader than presentation skills. So the Clued-in Capability Framework includes 6 interconnected domains. Training and delivery facilitation covers capabilities such as planning, facilitation, learner engagement, and the use of appropriate training strategies. Assessment practice considers the person's ability to interpret requirements, gather suitable evidence, make assessment judgments, provide feedback, and contribute to assessment quality. Learner support and engagement examine how trainers identify needs, support participation, respond to barriers, and create inclusive learning environments. Compliance and quality assurance consider how trainers apply organisational and regulatory requirements, maintain records, and contribute to continuous improvement. Industry and stakeholder collaboration include industry engagement, vocational currency, networking, and the use of stakeholder input to maintain relevant training. And professional practice and development include reflection, collaboration, leadership, and purposeful professional development. So these domains are included because the trainer and assessor role is complex. Somebody may be an engaging presenter but struggle with assessment judgment. Another person may understand compliance requirements but have difficulty adapting delivery for a diverse cohort. A single overall rating can't capture that complexity. So the framework describes capability across 4 developmental levels. We have emerging practitioner, skilled practitioner, advanced practitioner, and strategic leader. Now, these levels aren't based on years of service. A person doesn't automatically become an advanced practitioner because they've worked in VET for 10 years, right? They need to demonstrate the practice described at that level. At the same time, somebody relatively new to VET may bring substantial educational, industry, or leadership experience and demonstrate some higher level capabilities earlier than expected. Development is also unlikely to be perfectly even. A trainer may be advanced in industry engagement, skilled in training delivery, and still developing confidence in assessment design. Now, that's useful information because it allows the development conversation to become specific rather than reducing the person to one rating. It also helps with career progression. If a trainer wants to move into mentoring, resource development, or leadership, then the framework can show which capabilities are associated with that type of contribution. The conversation changes from, I've been here for 3 years, so I deserve a promotion, to here's a higher level practice I'm already demonstrating. Here's the evidence, and here are the capabilities I'm still developing. That's a much fairer conversation for everyone involved. Now, the traffic light process should never be based on how the trainer feels or whether the manager likes them or likes their style or is impressed with their charisma, right? Both the trainer and the manager should complete their initial review independently and consider the evidence supporting their choices. right? Evidence is really important here. Once they've done that, they then come together to compare their assessments. So where both have highlighted a capability green, great, we're in agreement on this. Where assessments differ, or where we have some yellow/orange statements, that's where the discussion becomes valuable, right? And I will say the aim here isn't for the manager to overrule the trainer, right? We start asking about, well, what evidence do we have of this, right? When there's a difference in assessment, the trainer might have highlighted a statement green, the manager might have highlighted it yellow, right? The trainer may have examples that the manager hasn't seen. The manager may be aware of patterns across learner feedback, assessment records, or team activities that the trainer hasn't considered. That conversation, though, can really reveal strengths, blind spots, misunderstandings, and areas where the organisation hasn't provided enough opportunity for the trainer to actually demonstrate that capability. So the framework creates the language for the conversation, but the evidence makes the judgment meaningful. Now, this structure is particularly helpful for RTO leaders and managers who don't come from a training and assessment background. A manager may be highly capable in operations, finance, HR, industry leadership, but that doesn't automatically mean that they know what high quality facilitation or assessment practice looks like. Without a clear framework, they may well rely on learner satisfaction, personal confidence, charisma, or the absence of complaints. Now, those indicators can provide information, but none of them's a reliable measure of capability on its own. A confident trainer isn't automatically a capable trainer. A popular trainer isn't automatically making valid assessment decisions. And the absence of complaints doesn't tell us whether learners are actually receiving appropriate training and support. A capability framework gives leaders a starting point. It helps them to understand the different areas of the role and to identify when they have enough evidence to make a judgment and when they need input from somebody with greater educational or assessment expertise. The tool doesn't replace leadership capability. The idea is that it helps leaders exercise that capability more consistently. Now, before the next video, I want you to look at the way that your RTO currently describes trainer and assessor capability. Review your performance appraisal process, your trainer matrices, position descriptions, PD plans, maybe even your probation processes, and ask whether these documents clearly describe what capable practice looks like. Could a trainer use them to understand what they're doing well and what stronger practice would look like? Could two managers use the same information and reach reasonably consistent conclusions? Would those managers be able to explain the evidence supporting their judgment? If the documents mainly record credentials, activities, and generic performance statements, then your RTO may not yet have a meaningful capability system. Now, if you can't clearly describe what capable practice looks like, you can't possibly assess it fairly, provide useful feedback about it, or help somebody develop it. And that's why I developed the Clued-In Capability Framework, to give trainers and managers a shared language across those 6 areas of professional practice and to make growth visible across the developmental levels. However, defining capability is only the first step. A framework can tell you what to look for, but you still need meaningful evidence of what the trainer's doing. So in the next video, we're going to go beyond the trainer file and into the training environment. We'll look at how observation can help leaders understand practice without turning the process into surveillance or making trainers feel as though they're being watched for mistakes. So subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. And if this video has made you question what your current performance review system actually measures, give it a like and share it with another RTO leader who needs to be part of this conversation. And I'll see you in the next one.